Hey crafty people, welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! What we're going to do today is some mixed media on masterboards. So I've got two 12x12s and a 8.5x11 page, and I know I'm mostly on, and I don't know what the heck I'm in there because the underside is, oh, you know what? I bet this is scrapbook paper that's single-sided, and that's why we've got some red showing through. Apparently I missed a few spots. That's okay. What we're gonna do should hopefully take care of that. And so these were made with papers I bought off of Amazon when I was first starting out that I'm kind of like, I don't love them. So we're going to play around a little bit with some mixed media to change up the look of these. So first one, what I want to do is, and we're going to try a couple different techniques. So for one, I am going to use my clear gesso and just apply a coat of clear gesso on top of this. So let me just show you what that looks like. And this was created using matte gel to apply my papers. So I don't know that this is necessarily required, but because it should have a little bit of grip from the matte gel, but we're gonna just do a coat of clear gesso over top of this whole thing. So I'll get it started just to show you basically what I'm doing, and then I'll finish it up off screen. So I'm just gonna do a thin coat with a paintbrush of clear gesso. So as you can see, it's clear, but what it's going to do is give some tooth to the paper so that when we start playing around with other mediums on top, they'll have something to grip to. So I'm going to go ahead and clear gesso this whole thing. I'll set it aside to dry. This is going to be one of those projects that it has a bunch of drying time in it, but that's all right. So that's what I'm going to do, cover the whole thing, clear gesso, and then I'll be back. Now for the next one, what I'm doing is I'm grabbing white gesso instead. So that's going to actually add a little white to our paper. So I've got my white gesso and I've got a brayer. I'm just going to put, I've got a little craft mat off to the side here. So I'm going to put a little white gesso on the mat. This white gesso is very, very thick. I'm going to use my brayer, and what I'm going to do here, let's shift this so you can see. There we go. And I'm just going to put a little on my brayer, and this is really thick. It might be, I really need to kind of do a full-on review of my craft supplies because, or my mixed media supplies, because yeah, they're definitely some that are a little less fresh than others, and I really need to use them more. So I'm just going on and adding some white to this with the gesso in spots to change the look. And I've got spots where the paper's peeking through, so let's make sure we get a good amount of gesso there. And because it's so thick, it's actually adding texture too as I go. And so I'm just gonna go around and just add bits of white to this to change up the look a bit. I think I'm gonna grab a paintbrush and just make that all white to cover up the spot that got missed. But yeah, this gesso is super thick. Add just a smidge of water to the gesso to hopefully get it to loosen up just a little bit so that it'll spread on a little easier. And I'm not looking for anything resembling even. I'm just adding it here and there, just to change up the look of this paper. And you'll notice, so some spots it's a little bit more opaque than others. The thinner you apply it, the more you're going to see through underneath, which is kind of what I'm going for, is to have a variety of spots with different amounts of gesso on it. I think that's good. I'm going to set this aside and let it dry completely and grab the other piece. Now for the last one, I'm going to grab, I've got some fiber paste, which is a semi-opaque acrylic texture medium, and it's adds a whole lot of texture, or it should, because it's, you'll notice, fibery. It's got lumps and clumps and stuff. So this is, I'm going to be applying this one again with the brayer so that we get different layers of thickness on there. And I still have some of the gesso on my mat, so that might end up getting on too. And this, because there's definitely some bits of, I don't know what on there, but I don't know what these are from, that the papers that I use, that I'm just like, I don't love them, but it creates a good base to then work off of. So this one, I'm definitely adding thicker in some spots that, you know, I don't love as much what's on there, so that I get more coverage. Like I kind of like the clock, the watches over here, so that I'll apply thinner. I'm definitely mixing in my gesso that's left on the mat, but you'll notice definitely more texture, or hopefully you can see that there's a lot of texture going on with this paste versus the gessos, which give it a little grip, but not a whole lot of texture because they don't actually have texture in them. I'm gonna pull my brush over because I don't really want to cover that up. So I'm just kind of getting it on as thin as possible over here where I like the clocks or the watches. Versus the people faces, like, I'm like, I don't really want people on here. Now, you can use whatever kind of paste you have. If you've got a transparent grip paste or an opaque paste, you know, whatever you've got. I just have this fiber paste and I don't use it often enough, so I figured let's pull it out and apply it. You could just do another one with gesso if you are playing along. The idea is just to add some stuff to it for our base layer to give it some grip and some interest and some texture, so that when we add color to it, which is going to be the next step, it's going to apply and grip in different spots differently, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to let this dry, and once everything is dry, we'll come back and start playing around with some pigment. Okay, so our masterboard that we put fiber paste on is dry, but I feel like I want to add more fiber paste, and I'm gonna need to go deal with some dogs here in a sec. But I want to be more strategic in where I add the fiber paste. So what I want to do is cut this down into the sizes and pieces that I'm going to use for this. So let me grab my paper trimmer, and let's move all this out of the way. Put this on my desk. And this is a 12 by 12 piece of paper, and I don't know if you can see all of the trimmer. The top is where my numbers are, and actually this, so I'm turning this over because I realized I didn't trim this off yet. They have been ridiculous today and are driving me crazy. I'm gonna go deal with dogs and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm gonna cut it in half at 6 inches. And then for one section, I'm gonna cut it into 3 4-inch pieces. And then for the top one, I'm gonna cut it into 4 3-inch pieces. Now for our 4-inch ones, I'm gonna just round the corners, and I do have a little bit overhanging on this. I'm just gonna do a little bit of cleanup, which I forgot to do before we started the project. Okay, so for the 4-inch ones, I'm gonna round all the corners. And I'm gonna use, I think, the bigger corner. So that's the 1/2 inch on my We Are Memory Keepers corner chomper. So those guys have their corners all rounded. For the 3-inch ones, I am gonna round the bottom corners. And then for the top corners, I'm gonna cut a tag shape. And this is just an old gift card that I cut the corners off to make tag shapes or a template. And I'm just gonna use that as my guide for trimming my corners. Okay, I think I want a steeper angle for the rest of them. Now that I've got everybody cut down to the size I want to use, I can come back in with the fiber paste and add it in strategic locations, in like a heavier concentration in some spots. I'll show you what I mean here in a sec. So like on this one, I think I want a little bit more like at the edges and do it a little thicker than we did with the brayer on some of the edges here. Just to add a bit more texture in spots. A little too much on over there. I'm just gonna scrape that off, thin that out a little bit, and then get some up on this corner, especially since I've got the red paper underneath showing. So I'm gonna set them aside to dry, and I'm just gonna go through and do that on all of these. Is just add some extra texture paste in spots. Say that 5 times fast. got a little bit of paper coming up on this corner, so let me just add a little glue to that. This one I'm going to start on this side since I keep starting them all on the right side. And yes, my dogs are engaging in puppy deathmatch in the background. I definitely want that face covered up. It just don't really want it on that piece. All right, I am just gonna let those guys dry, and when they are dry, I'll come back and we will add some inks to them to get some color going. Okay, so as I was sitting down getting ready to start adding colors to our masterboards, I realized something. These guys were not the ones with the fiber paste on them. This was the one with just the gesso on it, the white gesso. This one's the one with the fiber paste because, yeah, there's more texture on this one. So, what I think I might do, because I do want one that just has bits of gesso on it, of white gesso, is come in and take the one we just added clear gesso to and add some white gesso to it so that I have one that doesn't have the textury fiber paste on it. All right, and almost all of my 12 by 12s on screen, but I can't pull the camera back any further, so we'll just shift it around as we go. Let me get my gesso out. So I'm just gonna put a little white gesso on the craft mat I've got over here. And I think I switched which jars of gesso I was using. I think I used my smaller jar for the first part of this video, but it doesn't really matter all that much what white gesso you're using. Whatever you've got. And again, you could use white acrylic paint in the place of gesso. And I'm just gonna put a little on my brayer and just add it in strips along here, rolling it out. So it's just, the thicker it is, the more opaque it's going to be, the thinner, the more you'll be able to see what's underneath. And it doesn't really matter if I'm going in a bunch of random directions because this is going to get cut up later, so. All right, I think that's good. I'm going to set this aside to dry completely and do a bit of a cleanup because I got a bunch of gesso sitting on my mat over here because I put way too much out. So we're going to start with the 8.5 by 11 piece. I've put my splat box up because I am planning on using some sprays. And I have grabbed two of my faves, Uncharted Mariner and Salvaged Patina Distress Spray Stain. I've also grabbed a couple mica sprays, and I've grabbed Decayed and Crooked Broomstick. I've grabbed my Lindy's Moonshadow Mist, and it's Buccaneer Blue, which has blue, but it also has like a gray-brown in it, which I thought would go well with these two mica stains. And then I've also grabbed a little bit of old paper distress spray stain. The ones with the shimmer and the mica need to be mixed up, and I'm just gonna lay them on their side. I don't know that I'll be spraying the micas. I will probably got a little pipette to pull some of the color out and strategically place it instead of spraying, because that tends to get a little out of control. But that's where we're at. I'm gonna start with my distress spray stains because these are translucent, whereas the ones with the mica in it are gonna be a little semi-opaque, at least where the mica-y bits are, if that makes any sense. So I'm just gonna add a little of the Salvaged Patina, a little bit of the old paper, and a very little bit of Uncharted Mariner, because it is a potent color. And now I'm gonna spritz with a little water. See if we can get a little bit of movement going, particularly where I've got the super thick spots of Uncharted Mariner. And I think what I want to do is grab a makeup sponge. It's just a makeup sponge I got at the grocery store, and I'm going to use it to move my ink around, because this is not completely covered with a gesso, so it's not going to be as sturdy if it gets very, very wet. So I don't want to add too much water, just enough to help move stuff around. Because yeah, if I add too much water to it, I'm going to damage my paper. And you'll notice where we've got the texture paste, it's going to stay truer to the color and brighter than in the areas where we don't have the paste, which is fine. That's the idea. That's what I was going for. So that's our first round of stuff. Now I'm going to pull out my Buccaneer Blue by Lindy Stampin' Gang. I'm just tapping it from the nozzle. And I'm just going to leave it on its side because and I think trying to mix it in a little bit has completely lifted most of that off. All right, I'm going to hit this with my heat gun because I'm feeling like it's getting a little too wet. I'm going to add more of the Lindy's. And again, I'm going to give it a little light spritzing. And then hit it with my heat tool again. And now I think I'm gonna take my Decayed and add some of it. And what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my pipette and put a little water in it so that I can just add a little bit of water directly to a few of the spots. To kind of get a little bit of movement. And dilute the ink a little bit. And again, I'm coming in with the makeup sponge and kind of patting stuff down. I definitely want more of the Moonshadow mist. I definitely want more of this guy. I think we're gonna pull in the pipette and try doing that. Ooh, yeah. And now I'm gonna bring in my sponge and kind of spread it around a little bit. And drop stuff on the floor. And I think a little bit more. The fact that this is curving a bit is actually helping the ink move. I think, yeah, the Moonshadow mist is definitely looser than the like Distress Mica stain. So it's moving around differently. You know what? Since it's so loose, I'm gonna try getting some of it to spread out using my Tim Holtz squeeze thingy. I don't know what this is called. And this is one of those tools I was not going to get full price, but it was on sale half off at Joann's at Christmas time, so I might as well give it a try and see how it does it. Moving that ink around. All right, I'm gonna hit this with my heat tool. All right, I think I'm gonna add a little bit more Decayed. And spread that around with my sponge. also want a bit more Uncharted Mariner, but I think that one we're going to drop on so they can be a little bit more judicious. And then I'm going to come in with my sponge and kind of spread it out. I'm going to grab my Scorched Timber, and what I'm going to do is ink my edges and then use my sponge to pull some of that ink further into the piece. So I'm just running the whole ink pad along the edge of the paper. And then I'm going to use my sponge to kind of pull it in. And actually, I think I like this. I think I'm happy with where this is at. I'm gonna set it aside, and we are possibly gonna cut it up and turn it into things. I haven't decided if we're just gonna make the masterboards this time and do the decorating in another video or what. So we're gonna set this one aside. I'm gonna have a bit of a cleanup, and then we'll come back and do the ones we already cut up. Okay, so for the ones that we heavily coated with the fiber paste, I have pulled out some distress inks. I've got Old Paper, Victorian Velvet, and Shabby Shutters, and I've also grabbed the Victorian Velvet Distress Oxide because I might mix some of that in. And I've grabbed a couple more makeup sponges because I want to be strategic, more strategic in the application of the ink on these guys. Just kind of showing you different techniques for adding color to our mixed media masterboardy projects. So I've put some Shabby Shutters on my craft mat, added a little water to help it move a little bit, and I'm gonna go around and just add some Shabby Shutters here and there. Now keep in mind, distress inks are translucent, so it's showing up better on the piece where we've got the paste. So I'm just going to add a little green to all of them. All right, now I'm gonna do pretty much the same thing over again, just adding Victorian Velvet to everybody. So I'm gonna put more on my mat so I don't have to replenish my mat quite as often. And I'm probably gonna add more Victorian Velvet than I did with the Shabby Shutters. Okay, now I'm gonna pull in some of the old paper and add that on. And I am noticing that my sponge is leaving some debris, I think because of the texturiness of the paste, which is not a big deal. What we'll just do is once it's completely dry, go back in and take like a soft brush and brush off all of the makeup sponge dust. Alright, and last but not least, we're going to add some Victorian Velvet, Distress Oxide. And I think I'm going to mix in a little of the Distress Ink Victorian Velvet because the Oxide's got some opacity to it. It's covering up the white better than the Distress Ink did. But I want to darken up the color a little bit. So I think if I go over some of the Oxide areas with the Distress Ink, that'll get me closer to the color I want. And I'm actually going to pull out some Distress Oxide peeled paint and add a little bit of that on, since we know we get some more opacity and it covers up the white a little bit better, because I don't have Shabby Shutters in Distress Oxide, so the closest one I've got is peeled paint. And I don't know how bright the green's showing up on camera, but it's a little brighter than I want. So I'm gonna grab some Distress Oxide Brush Corduroy and add a little bit of that on, just to hopefully knock back how bright the green is. Yeah, I think that works. And I may just do a little over the pink as well. I knocked that back a little too much, so I just added a little bit more Victorian Velvet. Okay, I'm gonna have a bit of a cleanup and I'll be back. Okay, so there are our inked pieces and we've got one more masterboard to do. And this one's the one that just has gesso on it. And I think I'm just gonna grab my Distress Oxide Fossilized Amber and kind of brush it over the piece. And I'm gonna grab a sponge and rub it in. Scooch it up a little bit since I know I can't quite get the whole thing on camera at once. And now I'm gonna add, I think, some more of the Distress Oxide Brush Corduroy. I'm trying to decide if I want to try straight on. I think I am. I'm just going to add it in a few spots. And again, I'm just going to use a sponge, makeup sponge, to kind of blend it out so it's not so pronounced. And our spots with the gesso are definitely showing, if the color shows up brighter on those spots than on the rest of the paper. Just trying to decide, and I think what I'm gonna do is the foam stamp with numbers on it from PM Artist Studios. And I think it's by Froyle. And I'm gonna grab my Scorched Timber Distress Oxide ink and add some stamping to this one. Now, I've never stamped with a foam stamp and Distress Oxides before, so we're gonna see how this goes. Okay. I got some marks. See if that does any better. Okay, that did better. I just needed to ink it better. I'm gonna go back up here and stamp again. And I'll leave the name of the stamp down below. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. And the smushy bits are actually part of the stamp. So I've got this one, and then there's another stamp I picked up. Add a little of that. this one more time, going this way over here. And then I'm gonna grab some more numbers. This is Woodware, and the stamp set is Inky numbers, FRS 994. And I think I'm gonna grab this one, which I have used before. Put it on a block just to make it a little easier to handle. And I'm gonna come in with Scorched Timber and do that, here, and up here, and then I am going to, from high up, lightly spritz this. And then I'm going to grab a paper towel and pat it down, which should lift some of the ink, but not all of the ink, hopefully. So yeah, just tamped it back a little bit so that the numbers weren't quite so intense. I'm going to hit it with my heat gun. Okay, so I was editing this video and I realized that I am missing footage of me adding the hexagons to this masterboard. I don't know what the heck happened, but it's gone. I am gonna do a separate video on this because it's a pretty cool technique. It didn't turn out great here, but that's because I couldn't find the hexagon stencil I wanted to use. And I've had some thoughts on variations that can be done for people who don't have, because this is done with Dr. P.H. Martin's India ink. And if you don't have that, I have some thoughts on ways you can achieve the effect that I was going for using other supplies. So stay tuned for that. But this is our yellow and brown mixed media one where it just had gesso on it. So here is the one that we put fiber paste on and did spray inks on it. And I don't know how much of the shimmer you can see on camera from the mica, but it's got a lot of pretty shimmer to it. And then this is the one that started out as just having gesso on it. And I thought it was the fiber paste one, and we cut it up and added more fiber paste in strategic places and used a sponge to apply distress inks and oxide inks to our tags and journaling cards, and they've got all nice texture on them. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. And especially if you subscribe and hit the notification bell, you will be notified when I do the technique for creating the distress hexagons. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.